Hey guys, Joker the Fool here, back at it again with yet another review, and this is the Narwhal's Shorts Compendium. Now, I've reviewed quite a bit of Narwhal stuff, including Vatican City, Foreign Agent, and I've read Earthbound. I haven't reviewed those. I need to reread and review those one day, but I love Narwhal's work, so a Narwhal Short Compendium is right up my alley, I have to say. This is definitely a unique collection of stories, and one of the things that I love about Narwhal, other than this really funny picture here, is of course an index that shows all of the stories. If you do release a short story collection, I think this is something that's essential, does help you keep things organized. And of course, for someone like me who reviews these books, and whenever I review a collection of short stories, I always like to go by story. So if you read the written review, then I break down each story and I give a little short blurb of what I think about the story. And then of course here it's just me going to be rambling about the story. So Naked Samurai is what we're starting off. Most of this is done by Narwhal, so this compendium contains three, I guess, issues, or I guess parts of Naked Samurai, and this is basically just probably late Edo period, just before the Meiji Restoration. It's probably, you're thinking about like 1650 to 1750 is when this takes place. Maybe even closer to the 1700s, but definitely, like I said, between 1650 and 1750 is when this takes place. And it's just basically the legend of the Naked Samurai wreaking absolute havoc in medieval Japan. And of course, you've got the first story where it's just introducing the Naked Samurai and an imposter that goes around to steal as a Naked Samurai, so it can steal from banks. The second one being about these two twins that go. Let's see if I can find... we got Naked Samurai 3, which is done by Fresher Luke. It's a bit of a unique story. This is a Naked Samurai trying to get hunted down, or at least the imposter, by a woman, and that, of course, has some funny implications as well. And then, yes, Naked Samurai number 2 really focuses on these two twin characters, and one of the things I have to say is that Narwhal can have a tendency for the characters that look kind of the same, and these twins do look like some characters in Earthbound. I think Wiz is the name that kind of the name of the character that kind of reminds me. But these two twins that have like this massively long sword, and it's all about a battle that is that happens in that series. So we've got my post-it notes to try and keep everything organized, kind of messing with things here, but we'll zoom out there. But yeah, that is Naked Samurai. So it's a really interesting romp. I think it's probably the most structured story in the Narwhal Shorts Compendium, other than the Earthbound stories. And there are 3 stories, but as you can see with the index, you have Naked Samurai, and then Pickle and Earthbound Draft, and then the Naked Samurai 2, and then a couple other stories, and then the third Naked Samurai. But in totality, the Naked Samurai stories are actually pretty compelling and interesting, and I definitely would read a full-on work with that. But next up is going to be Pickle. So Pickle is done by Danicat with Narwhal writing, and this definitely has a style that really fits in well with what Narwhal does. Of course, you've got that classic lettering where it's very where when the onomatopoeia is written, it's not very like formal and digital. It looks very much handwritten. I think that's part of the charm, and of course, the word balloons have that really bent and wonky style, which is very much indicative of what makes Narwhal style absurdist. That's the word that I like to use in my written reviews. Abstract is another way, but I think it does work out quite well. And this is basically a guy in a tavern saying, hey, I survived out in the ocean for 2 weeks by drinking salt water. And he's like, prove it. I'll drink pickle juice. And he drinks the pickle juice, and they all drink the pickle juice, and it's too salty. And it leads to this like legendary guy who can drink pickle juice. And that's basically kind of riffing on the same themes of Naked Samurai, in the sense that it's this character that becomes legendary for very absurd reasons. So it does fit in well with Naked Samurai, and it does fit in well with the style that Narwhal is known for. But that is Pickle. Simple story. Next, we've got Earthbound Draft. So the Earthbound series is what really introduced me to Narwhal. And Earthbound Draft is a story about a prince who is drafting for the Earthbound games. It's really vague. Narwhal's got a world building that's really subtle and vague. It's been a while since I've read the other Earthbound stories. But basically, you've got these games, you have these sponsors that participate in these games, and the prince is trying to get he's trying to draft somebody, and of course, he's more focused on partying and being completely debauched in the way he acts, and that leads to his ultimate demise. You do have some interesting stuff with the rings and reincarnation, and of course, just the sponsors and the drafts in general. And of course, I'm not sure if I want to show it off necessarily, but you do have this massive character here who lives underwater. You can kind of see her. Of course, some of the other scenes of her, if you read this, are a bit, I'd say X-rated, but they're definitely a bit too risque for YouTube. So I don't want to necessarily show those off. But art is absolutely fantastic. I believe, if I can get who the artist is, Fresher Luke is the artist on this, with Narwhal doing the colors. So it does looks, I would say, more structured for an Earthbound story. It's less, like of these really soft lines where things are drawn quite absurdly. And it's definitely got more, like the character designs feel more structured and such, but it still fits in very well with the Earthbound style that's been established. And it does offer some pretty interesting world building for Earthbound while keeping it mystical and vague at the same time. So it is a really nice experience and fits in well with what Earthbound is. So this is, of course, Naked Samurai, but we're next up is going to be Owl Creek. So this is called The Occurrence on Owl Creek, and it does look like these backgrounds were AI generated, and Narwhal and I believe Sheila aliens, or Sheila aliens, I guess that's the name, kind of put the impose the art on that. And this is basically a man who gets hanged, and then on the descent down, he has this, I guess, psychedelic mystical experience that ends very suddenly, as you can see right there. And it is a really nice, I would say it's a really interesting story. The way it's structured, the way it's paced, does kind of like leave you confused as to what's happening, and then once it ends, it's like, oh, it all makes sense. So it's a really well structured story, even if it is like even if it's like very morbid, and it's very morbid, mysterious at the same time, and then also there's a lot of clarity at the end. So it's a really interesting story. Next up is The Mask of Red Death. This is done by Mistress Manito, with color by Narwhal, and of course this is an adaptation of an Edgar Allan Poe story done by Narwhal. And I do like the art on this. It does have a nice, again, it's a darker style of this, and it's also definitely drawn quite abstractly. You can see the faces are definitely a bit jarring, but that is definitely an intentional thing. And we've got the, let's see, I'd say this is definitely taking Poe's riff on lampooning the bourgeoisie, and this becomes a commentary on COVID. You can see they're wearing the masks. The elites are not wearing the masks, which, is reminding you of what Gavin Newsom did at the French Laundry, right? And that's the theme there. So it takes this story that Poe wrote in the 19th century and links it to a modern day occurrence. And of course, it weaves in the breaking of the fourth wall and has this very absurdist style as well, which is what Narwhal is known for. So it's a really well structured story, and it is also indicative of the it also exemplifies what makes Narwhal a really good storyteller. So this is definitely one of the stories I probably enjoyed the most from the Shorts Compendium. Of course, that is Naked Samurai 3. We've got Earthbound Trade, which is just another simple Earthbound story. This does have more of a Silver Age feel to it. You've got, of course, Nicholas Hunter, who is the one who drew this story, with Narwhal writing, and this, like I said, has a more of a Silver Age feel. This is more or less just a conversation between this guy and that guy who is trying to get into wants to get sponsored, basically get into the games, and he's also offering himself as a fugitive. So it does have this implications for what the world is like as well between this basically one conversation. So it is quite interesting. It does offer some world building, and it definitely has less a smaller scope because it's more or less basically just focused around one character interaction for most of the story, with a very short introduction that ties into that character interaction. So it is a very, I'd say, simplistic story, but at the same time, it does give you some pretty good insight into the world of Earthbound, which absolutely love to see that. So this is Cave Slave, and I'm not going to give my review of Cave Slave because I reviewed this as a standalone comic. So be sure to check that out on Velvet Room Publishing. But if you want to know what Cave Slave is like, I already reviewed this as a standalone because I have it as a standalone book. But we are going into the final story, and this is called Robo-Zon. So this is basically done by Narwhal, have some 3D assistance with Jose Tassos and Mistress Manito. But if you have basically the idea, and this is a bit of, I guess, a meme, where you put, 1,000 monkeys or whatever into a room with typewriters, they'll eventually produce the works of Shakespeare. And this is basically the premise of the story. And it really is just an absurdist romp with this, like, millions of years pass between the monkeys trying to escape this room. Of course, you've got the great elevator. You've got it being self-referential with like Narwhal mentioning himself as being like part of the great elevator. But a lot of this does fall. You see right there. A lot of this does fall into absurdity. So while there are some interesting themes, and some of this does, riff on some cool parts of the human condition or just existence in general, it is told with very little dialogue, and there is very little story structure in this, so it feels more absurd and wacky for even my taste, as someone who's a fan of Narwhal. So if you want a structured story that really riffs on these philosophical themes, the story really isn't that. This is just, I'd say, pure Narwhal wackiness, and it definitely works for a good it's definitely going to work for a good portion of the audience, and I think it definitely is a cool romp, but it's still like it's a little bit too wacky in some sense of some sense of the term. But still, I still think it's structured decently well, and like I said, I think the idea is unique and fun, and that's really what Narwhal does when he keeps it about when he does his comics. But I think this is definitely worthy of the praise that Mark Miller gave him. This guy's absolutely the best storyteller in comics right now. Got a great collection. He did something really unique with this Shorts Compendium. Hopefully he does more short story collections like these and just more comics in general. He did an absolutely fantastic job of collecting these works, putting them together in a pretty high quality collection. A couple print areas and some of Naked Samurai where like there were some typos, but other than that, a very readable, good experience of a book. Definitely recommend this one if you guys can pick it up. But that's really all I have to say. Hopefully you guys enjoy this review of the Narwhal Shorts Compendium. Joker is out.
Thank you for stopping by the Velvet Room. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe so you can keep up with Velvet Room Publishing. And go to velvetroompublishing.com if you want to go even deeper into the Velvet Room.